Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's presentation here on FET. We're going to be talking about tax-exempt sales of mobile machinery units. Before we get started, whoever's got the background going here, could I get everybody to mute their phone? There's a lot of unnecessary background noise here, so I want to make sure all the participants can hear. So thank you very much. Get started here. Most of you know me. I run the FET hotline. There's my contact information, email, phone number here. So if you have any questions or if there's anything that I can help with post the webinar, please feel free to shoot me an email or give me a call. I'll be glad to help you out. Go from there. But I work in our firm's dealership practice. I work with mostly heavy-duty truck trailer dealers, few auto dealers. I specialize in tax, with whether it be income tax, transactional tax, such as sales and use, and of course FET. So again, when you call the FET hotline, you get me. So most of you I've either talked to in some shape or form or helped along the way. So welcome to today's presentation. This is the fourth and final webinar that we'll be conducting this year, and hopefully these have been beneficial to everyone and help you out. So with that, just cover today kind of what we'll cover here. We'll go over section 4053, which talks about all the exemptions from federal excise tax on heavy trucks, trailers. We'll focus on the mobile machinery exception here. There's several other exemptions, but today's webinar will focus on the mobile piece. We'll also get into the off-highway use exemptions. We'll talk about the special design test, substantial impairment, go through a couple examples, some IRS rulings, and then should have plenty of time for some Q&A. It's not a very big section, so it's definitely not the cure for insomnia, and but it's good stuff, and it's it's something that if you are selling specialized units or to certain industries, it's something you definitely need to be aware of. There are very narrowly interpreted laws with this. So we'll jump right in here. Section 4053 covers all the exemptions. Now keep in mind there are no special registrations, exemption certificates, anything like that to substantiate the exemption of these sales. So if you're looking for an exemption certificate, you're not going to find it with these. These are just by sheer nature, these are exempt sales. So the first one here for our good farmer friends. Now farmers are notorious for pretty much telling you they're exempt on everything. Well, that may be the case, but there are certain exemptions on bodies for them. So the chassis may still be taxable, but keep in mind the body, if it's primarily designed to do any of these functions here with the processing, hauling, spreading, loading, unloading, or any combination in connection with seed, feed, fertilizer, etc. Those bodies could be exempt. Now, they have to be primarily designed, so be careful here. So if if you've got something here that a body that you can haul seed in it one day, but you can haul gravel or something on the weekends, that's not gonna cut it. It has to be primarily designed for one of these farm applications or agricultural purposes. So be careful with that. Second one here is house trailers, ambulances, hearses, concrete mixers. Those are all exempt. Again, no special exemption certificates, no other documentation. No other documentation, but I would recommend you keep any documentation in the deal file just in case if you're ever examined, you can pull that out and show that that's why you sold it FET exempt. Trash containers here. The box containers, receptacles, those large dumpster type things, those are generally exempt. They're not designed to be permanently mounted. They can be taken off and picked up and used as receptacles for garbage. Rail trailers, rail vans, basically any chassis body which is designed for both the use as a highway vehicle and a railroad car, those will be exempt. Be careful here because the piggyback trailer, semi-trailer, that's not designed to be used as a railroad car. So, make sure. I think I've got a pretty good example there on the screen. I think that's probably as close as I could get to showing you what those look like. But anyway, those would be exempt. Idle reduction devices, I believe these are more for the tractors, but basically, you know, anything when the unit is at rest, any device or system that could, you know, used to operate the main drive engine while it's parked, remain stationary, fixed to the motor, you know, qualifies for the EPA. Those would be exempt as well. There is some certain insulation. It's R35, so depending on what you're putting that in, whether it be a trailer or a truck or whatever it may be, that would be exempt as well. And then finally, we get to the mobile machinery, which is kind of the purpose of today's training here. Basically, the mobile machinery is pretty much any vehicle which consists of a chassis that has been permanently mounted, whether it's welded, bolted, riveted, you know, machinery equipment. It can perform a construction, manufacturing, processing, the whole bit there. Some kind of operation, and the operation of that equipment is unrelated to the transportation. And I'll get into that here, what that means exactly here in a second. But in a nutshell, that's basically what mobile machinery exemption is. It must be designed to serve only as the mobile carriage and mount. It's a power source. It's basically that unit is dedicated for that machinery, whether or not it's in operation or not. And then due to its special design, without substantial modification, that chassis could not perform any other function. So if I've got a chassis that I say, well, this is dedicated to hauling steam equipment only, and it's specially designed, but you say, well, I could take that off and put a flatbed on it and haul steel. That's not going to meet the test. So that chassis has to be specially designed to perform that one function. Or if you did try to change it into a flatbed, you would have to incur so much cost and so much processes that it wouldn't be really feasible to do that. So just know those are some of the requirements. The mobile machinery exception assumes the vehicle is roadworthy. It focuses on the chassis, whether it's limited solely to that transportation of that job site equipment. Now be careful here, the loading and unloading cargo contributes to the transportation. So any permanently mounted machinery or equipment having that purpose would trip the unrelated to transportation requirements. So if I have a flatbed and I have a crane on it, on the end of it, that can unload cargo on that. So let's say I'm hauling shingles or bricks, that's not going to meet the exception. Same thing with, you know, I see a lot of these forklifts that are attached to the back of the trailer. The forklift is exempt, but the trailer is not. So again, make sure you know that the unloading and loading of cargo of that machinery trips that for the task there. So I touched on that earlier. Any cargo hauling capacity, regardless of its size, weight, in addition to the exempt equipment, will fail that especially designed requirement. They do give you a little bit of break here for incidental cargo. So, you know, if you got some small areas for tools, clothing, things of that nature, you're going to be okay with that. But if it has any cargo carrying capacity at all, if I can haul even a pallet of bricks or a pallet of shingles on it, that's going to trip it. It's not going to meet the mobile machinery exception. And again, it just requires exclusive dedication and any special modification to that chassis. Be careful here. So you might have a perfectly exempt unit, but you say, you know what, gosh, I can put a cargo area on here that I can haul, you know, stuff down the road with it. In addition to that equipment, that's going to trip that exemption. So even if it's not part of the chassis itself, so be careful with that. And here's a good example of this with mostly on the truck side, but I guess it could occur. A similar situation could occur otherwise. But Florida Power and Light was a case where a taxpayer had a perfectly exempt electric utility truck. And these are trucks that, you know, serve power lines, things of that nature, I believe. But anyway, perfectly exempt truck, rolls down the road all day, exempt. But the problem was the Power and Light Company put a pencil hook on the back of it. And what that did is it allows that unit to now pull a trailer, which pulls cargo. And we just talked about that. If it can haul cargo or has any carrying capacity, that will trip it. So basically, the IRS came in and said, well, all those awesome little power trucks you have now, those are taxable now because you just added a hitch. So be careful when you're adding parts and accessories to otherwise perfectly exempt units, because you might be tripping that exemption without knowing it. But again, that's a great case that's out there, and actually the IRS is trying to get this incorporated into law now. So just know that that's out there. There are some examples of some qualifying vehicles. For those of you in the oil and gas industry or serve that segment, these are more on the truck side. The wireline service units, I'm not sure if anybody's ever seen those, but those can do nothing else but serve the oil and gas industry. They're big, they're bulky. They do a specific service with that industry. So there's no cargo carrying capacity. So I believe these things measure, wells, the oil wells, and certain logistics or analytics with the wells and things like that. So again, that would be an example of an exempt unit. Another case here, there was a trailer that was especially designed as a mobile carriage mount power source for let's see. I think it's for a water waste treatment facility. There was another exemption where there was a transport antenna. Antenna was thrown on the back of this thing, and it had no cargo carrying capacity. It was solely dedicated to moving this antenna and tripod around in certain places. It was permanently bolted, permanently affixed. No significant possibility that could carry any other type of machinery, equipment, cargo without some kind of substantial modification. So that was another one. There was another case here where there's a lowboy semi-trailer, permanently equipment mounted to produce steam. It had a especially designed to accommodate the boiler. It provided enclosed stationary shelter for this plant or water treatment system. So again, those were probably Red Cross type vehicles, disaster type vehicles where they needed to put a trailer and provide some water for those affected by the conditions there. But again, a good example of something that could do nothing else other than produce that steam. Here are some examples that didn't, and there's been a lot of talk about these. There are certain exemptions on these, like some of the equipment. It's all facts and circumstance based. There's not really one, catch-all here, but there were some crane trucks, utility trucks, had large racks mounted, carried pipes, could carry a substantial load, had a carriage for a crane, but since it had the crane was on there, yes, absolutely, but the fact that it could load and unload the pipes, that trips it. There was another road truck chassis, had some aerial equipment, had some outriggers to stabilize the truck. It wasn't specially designed, so you could take that equipment off of there, and you could put something else on it. You could put a box on it or a flatbed or something. So it didn't really meet any kind of a special design exemption there. Industrial vacuum loaders, sewer cleaners, here's a case where the large collector bodies that are mounted on a chassis, IRS will deem that as being able to transport cargo, whether it be sewage, water, whatever it may be. Now, with that being said, there are certain exemptions for some of the machinery if they can be deemed exempt or not attributable to the transportation of the unit itself. So, and again, those will be on a very fact and circumstance basis. I can't sit here and say, yeah, all pumps are exempt or all booms or whatever, they're all exempt. They're not. There may be a case where they are, but again, there's a lot of specialized machinery and things of that nature out there in the industry right now. So again, without digging into the details on a certain situation, again, there's not really one bulletproof exemption here. So anyway, the IRS deemed that since the unit could collect the sewage and haul it down the road, it had a cargo carrying capacity. It served as a transportation function. So again, they deemed it as taxable. So that's mobile machinery. Again, it's still a very gray area out there. And again, keep in mind that this tax was enacted 100 years ago to fund World War I. So, and there hasn't been a whole lot of changes to the code. There's a lot of regulations, court cases, things of that nature that we can kind of draw from analogy to try to make it applicable to our case or not. But again, it's the fact that it hasn't been changed or updated creates a lot of gray areas. And of course, the trucking and transportation industry has evolved 100 times since the passage of this. So with that, we'll get into the off-highway use exemption here. So similar to some of the requirements under the mobile machinery, there's two tests here. So, the vehicles would not be treated as a highway vehicle if it's specially designed for the primary function of transporting a particular type of load other than over the public highway. And because of that design, its capability to transport it is substantially limited or impaired. And we'll get into the definitions of these here in a second. But the thing you have to understand here is the IRS takes a very, very narrow look at this, okay? So you have to really have all the T's crossed, I's dotted, and be careful with this because agents will look at your marketing materials and make sure you have a consistent story with what you're selling here. So if you're selling something that you say is specially designed, substantially impaired, but he goes to the showroom and looks at your marketing materials and says, well, this can haul anything and it's not specially designed. You can outfit it with different types of beds and it can go 100 miles an hour down the road. That's a problem. So make sure your marketing materials don't contradict your sales here and what you're asserting for FET. So the other thing here, and this is very common, and this is where I talk about don't let your customers dictate what's taxable or not, but you can't just look at the intended use. You have to look at, can it be used off highway? So if a customer comes in and says, hey, I'm going to buy this trailer or truck or whatever, it's never going to touch the road. I'm never going to license it. I'm never going to put it on the highway. It's going to sit in the field. I'm going to take the wheels off. That's not going to cut it. That's a taxable trailer. Otherwise, if it's not substantially or specifically designed or substantially impaired. So be careful of that. You have to meet both the tests, and you have to meet them in order. So once you satisfy the special design test, you move on to the substantial impairment test. And again, you might meet one of these, but without both of them, you've got a taxable unit for the most part. So just understand that there is an order here, and the agent will require you to prove that and document that and get him or her comfortable with the position you're taking here. So we talked about this, the special design. It must be designed for the primary function of transporting loads over the public, other than over the public highway, and it's based on the physical characteristics. So again, it's not the intended use of it. It's whether the, it's a special design that, hey, this is specifically designed for a certain use. It can't be used for anything else. And again, whether the ultimate purchaser registers it for highway use or actually uses it on the highway doesn't matter. There's a IRS letter ruling out there from a while back. Basically says the off-highway exemption is typically applied to oversized vehicles, makes them unsuitable. Vehicles transport a load, but to transport off the highway, such as mines or quarries, that off-highway exemption vehicle is still exempt from tax as long as the special off-highway design is for the primary function of transport its load and it substantially limits or impairs its case. or its use. So there is a pretty good letter ruling out there that you guys can read through. I can send it to you, but does a good job of kind of walking through what this test means. The special design test is not met by just making some slight modifications. So throwing some oversized tires, putting some mirrors on it, adding some oversized banners or some flags, that's not going to do it. So again, there's another letter ruling out there. It's the code is, or the section is right there. I can send it to somebody if they want to read through it. But it basically, is a ruling that said, just because you're throwing just some of these, small components on it, is not gonna meet that special design test. So here's some questions to kind of run through if you do have, potentially an exempt unit. So the first one here is, we talked about this, the chassis. Is it a standard highway chassis? And if so, were any substantial modifications made? Basically, is it specially designed? Is it specifically designed to carry a particular load? If so, what is it? Is it boulders? Is it, whatever it could be? What are the special characteristics? How do they contribute to transporting it over the highway? Is it over height, overweight, et cetera? And how does that contribute to transporting the load? What's that mean? Is it structurally different than a standard highway vehicle? And is it not required to be registered? Again, just because you might meet one of these doesn't really get you off the hook. You kind of got to, have a pretty good case, build a pretty good case to meet most, if not all of these. Like I said, one is not going to do it. And the IRS will really test you on a lot of these things. So the substantial impairment test is the second part. So once you've met the specifically designed test, you move to the set, and if you satisfy that, you're good. You go to the substantial impairment test. So that's based upon, the size of the vehicle. Does it need to be licensed or differently? Are there safety issues with it versus the regular vehicle or unit? What are the other highway requirements? Does it need a chase car? Can it go over certain, can it or can it not go over certain bridges, or, et cetera? And really, here's the number here for, you'll see this potentially a lot. Can it travel over 25 miles per hour? If it can, you might not have an exempt unit, but if it can't, that's just one more, criteria that you need to look to that will help support an exempt unit. So there's another letter ruling out here, does a good job of walking us through, a case here where there's a vehicle. It looked to, can the unit travel regular speeds? Does it require certain permits? All that good stuff. So again, that's another letter ruling out there that does a good job of, painting that picture for us here. And then similar to the special design test, here's some questions for that. So, how is it impaired? Can it not travel over 25 miles per hour? Is the speed substantially limited? Does the vehicle operator pay a higher annual registration fee for its unrestricted use? Is there a special permit, signage, and escort chase car required for it? If there is a permit, does the cost increase according to size or weight? Is it restricted to certain hours, days, roads, weather conditions, months of the year? All that good stuff that you kind of got to, can it only travel certain miles per day or certain whatever? And, of course, does it need to be equipped with special mirrors, flags, lights, monitoring equipment, et cetera? And again, you got to meet probably most of these. I mean, one of these is not going to get you off the hook. So just be aware of that. That you really need to make the case to have an exempt unit here. Some examples of vehicles that qualified. Cotton trailers, those are pretty big, bulky, pretty unstable. I'm not sure if anybody's ever seen any of those, but they're hard to travel at normal highway speeds. They're kind of messy, but again, those would be examples of exempt units. There was a couple semi-trailers here designed to pick up bales of hay, transfer them to fields where they were used to store, or stored as used as feed. That trailer wasn't designed to handle any other cargo. It could have, and here we go, it could attain the highway speeds, but it was overhyped, overweight, didn't have running lights, therefore you couldn't be operating at night. So there's a good example of something that probably would qualify. And again, most of these are, agricultural related, but you really have to be careful in making sure that you're meeting several of these exemptions before you can just say, yeah, I got an exempt unit. But again, peanut, soybean drying trailers, other good examples. Couldn't be safely driven more than 20 miles per hour, no brakes, taillights, no signs, no stoplights, all that good stuff. More examples here: de-icer vehicles, used at commercial airports. Apply the de-icing fluid to the plane. They couldn't travel more than 25 miles per hour with all the substantial fluid they had in their tanks. Continually at risk of tipping. That's not good. Think of that the next time you're sitting on the tarmac getting de-iced. That's a awful thought. But anyway, and again, they couldn't climb a grade more than 3%. But again, the design features substantially limited their use when they were transporting that load. So another example here, stack movers. These are trucks designed to pick up large quantities of loose or baled hay. The body was designed for transport other than over highway, and the special design of that vehicle made them over width, and in most states over height, over length, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It required a special permit. And it could only be operated during the day. So other examples there. Here's some examples that did it. So again, these vacuum loaders, the unit might be exempt, but there could be some potential parts and pieces depending on the facts and circumstances that could be exempt. But for the most part, the chassis and the body were taxable here. So again, these units didn't meet the exemption because they were able to transport cargo, and the sewage, the water, there was no substantial impairment or limits to carrying that. They could go at regular speed. They were not over height, over weight, over width, so you're not going to meet that all day. Military combat vehicles. I get a lot of questions on military vehicles, and federal government by their sheer nature is taxable. And I know that seems odd. It's the government taxing itself, but it's not like state and local. State and local are exempt just by who they are, but military vehicles, those can be taxable. And the assertion here was it might have been a little over height, a little more overweight, but it could go 65 miles per hour. Didn't have any special permits, no escorts. The size of it enabled it to transport its load. No special impairments or limited use on the highway. Heavy-duty dump trucks, 9 feet wide. They're big, but they can go 65, 70 mile an hour. Sand dump trucks. Here we had, some pretty big units, but they could still go 55. Trucks were not specially designed for extremes, whether it be weather or conditions in a certain part of the country or types of terrain. So that's not going to cut it. Boat trailers, capable of hauling boats. They did have some special design features, right? They probably can't be used to carry anything else, but they were irrelevant. There was no, despite their weight, their load, they could travel normal highway speeds. And here's a situation, the own advertising materials and invoices emphasize that they could be used on the highway and non-highway. So again, make sure those marketing materials support your position you're taking. So here's some 5 general rules to consider kind of when you think you have an exempt unit, or when you're trying to navigate whether to charge FET or not. But just know the off-highway exemption applies to the entire vehicle. The special design features can be on the body, the chassis, or both. And again, you must meet both tests in order, which the first one is the special design test before you meet the special or the substantial impairment test. The term highway means any non-private road, not just interstates. The design test is not a use test. Even if the unit will never ever be used on public highway, and your customer will assert that, it doesn't give rise to passing the design test. And then finally, the statute is very narrowly reviewed by the IRS, very fact specific. If you believe you have a trailer that may qualify FET exempt, again, be ready to, defend that. Make sure you've got the proper documentation in the file. Consider consulting a tax advisor to help you walk through that, just to make sure that you don't get whipsawed by FET in case you're ever examined. The statute for this is all found here at 7701 A48A. Again, I don't think it's a very large statute. It's won't take you too long to go through it, but some of those revenue rulings are pretty good. If anybody would like a copy of the slide deck after the presentation, I'm more than happy to send that out, which I usually do. Or if I can gather some of those letter rulings for you to look through it, I can certainly do that as well. So with that, not a lot of information today, but it's a very important section of the code. Depending on who your customer is, depending on who you're selling to, depending on what you're manufacturing or putting on your lot here. So that is my contact information. Again, this is the last of the webinars for this year. I'll open it up to questions here, but before I do that, I want to thank Gwen Brown from the NTDA. Does a great job with our organization here, setting these up and getting the word out. Thanks to Jen Turley, she's here with me, and Clifton Larson Allen does a great job of making sure I don't do the wrong thing, making sure my phone works, make sure the slide decks work, so I appreciate all her help. And then finally, thanks to you guys, the NTDA members. Great members. We just came back from the conference down in Florida, had a great time, and good group of folks, and I really enjoy helping the organization, whether it be with these webinars or the FET hotline. So with that, I am open to any questions. If you're like me, you'll think of something next week, please give me a call, shoot me an email, and I'll be glad to help you out. So any questions?